You have seen his face 1,000 times, on church walls, in paintings, in films. The long flowing hair, the soft features, the calm pale face. You can probably picture it right now without even trying. But here is the uncomfortable truth. Almost everything you are picturing is wrong. The face you know was never described in the Bible. It was invented centuries later by artists who never met him, in a part of the world he never visited. And when modern scientists used real human skulls from his exact time and place to rebuild the face of a man like him, what emerged looked nothing like the image you grew up with. So today, we're going to ask a question that sounds simple, but has a genuinely surprising answer. What did Jesus really look like? Stay with me, because the truth is more interesting and more meaningful than the picture on the wall. Let us start with the face everyone knows. If I asked you to draw Jesus, you would probably sketch a tall man with light skin, long, straight, or wavy brown hair, a soft beard, and gentle European features. That image is everywhere. It is on candles and posters and stained glass in nearly every corner of the world. But here is the strange part. That picture is mostly the invention of European art, shaped over many centuries and perfected during the Renaissance, more than 1,000 years after Jesus actually lived. Painters in Europe naturally painted him to look like the people around them. Over time, those paintings became so familiar that people forgot they were artistic choices, not historical records. The soft, fair, long-haired Jesus is essentially a portrait of European imagination. And it gets even more interesting. The very earliest images of Jesus, from the first few centuries after his death, do not look like that at all. In some of them he is young and beardless, dressed like an ordinary Roman, almost unrecognizable compared to the figure we know today. The truth is, no one in the early church seemed to agree on what he looked like, because nobody had written it down. Which brings us to the most surprising fact of all. We are told what he said, where he walked, who he healed, how he died, but not the color of his eyes, not the length of his hair, not whether he was tall or short, handsome or plain. The gospel writers simply did not consider his appearance worth recording. And the few hints we do have point in an unexpected direction. There is a line in the book of Isaiah, written long before, that many connect to him. It says he had no form nor comeliness, and no beauty that we should desire him. In other words, nothing about his appearance made him stand out. He was, by the sound of it, completely ordinary looking. There is another clue, and it is a chilling one. On the night Jesus was arrested, his betrayer Judas had to identify him to the soldiers with a kiss. Stop and think about why that was necessary. If Jesus had looked dramatically different from the men around him, if he glowed or towered over them, you would not need a signal to pick him out of a crowd. The fact that they needed Judas to point him out tells us something. He looked like just another man among his friends. He blended in. So, if the paintings are imagination and the Bible stays silent, is there any way to actually know? For a long time, the answer was no. And then, science offered a way in. In 2001, a British forensic expert named Richard Neve, a medical artist from the University of Manchester, set out to answer the question not by guessing, but by using the same techniques police use to reconstruct faces from unidentified remains. He could not use Jesus' actual skull, of course. No such thing exists. So he did the next best thing. Working with Israeli archaeologists, he obtained 3 real skulls of Semite men who had lived in Galilee, the very region Jesus came from in the 1st century, the very time he lived. These were the bones of ordinary men from Jesus' own world. Neve scanned the skulls with computer tomography, building precise 3-dimensional models of their structure. Then, using data on how thick human muscle and skin sit on the bone, his team rebuilt the face layer by layer. They added clay for the muscles, then skin, then a nose, lips, and eyes, following exactly what the underlying bone dictated. For the details the bone could not reveal, like hair and skin tone, they turned to ancient artwork and historical records from the region. And the face that emerged was striking precisely because it was so ordinary, a broad, weathered peasant's face, dark olive or brown skin, tanned by a life outdoors, dark eyes, a wide nose, and short, dark, curly hair with a short beard, not the long flowing locks of the paintings. In fact, the hair is its own clue. In the Apostle Paul's own letters, he writes that it was considered shameful for a man of that culture to wear long hair. So the long-haired image we cherish may be one of the least likely details of all. A working man from 1st century Galilee almost certainly kept his hair short and practical. Now, an honest word, because this matters. Neve himself was always careful to say, "This is not a portrait of Jesus." No one rebuilt Jesus' actual face. What he created is the face of a typical man from Jesus' time and place. But that is exactly the point. Whatever Jesus looked like in his specific features, this is the world his face came from. Brown-skinned, dark-eyed, ordinary, and unmistakably Middle Eastern. Not the European figure on the wall. And then there is the one object that claims to show his actual face. The Shroud of Turin. The shroud is a long strip of linen kept in Italy, and it bears the faint, ghostly image of a crucified man, front and back, as if his body had been wrapped in it. Marks that look like wounds, stains that look like blood. For centuries, many have believed it to be the actual burial cloth of Jesus, and that the image is a kind of photograph of his face, burned into the fabric at the moment of resurrection. So, is it real? In 1988, 3 separate laboratories in Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona performed radiocarbon dating on samples of the cloth. Their conclusion was that the linen dated to somewhere between 1260 and 1390, the Middle Ages, more than 1,000 years after Jesus died. By that result, the shroud would be a medieval creation, not an ancient one. But here is where it gets murky and why the debate has never died. In the years since, researchers have argued that the tested sample may have come from a section repaired after a fire, contaminating the result. Others point to features of the image, the blood chemistry, the way it was formed, that they say no medieval forger could have faked. The argument continues to this day, with serious people on both sides. The shroud remains one of the most studied and most disputed objects on Earth. Whatever you believe about it, the face it shows, a bearded Middle Eastern man, fits the science better than the paintings do. So let us come back to where we started. What did Jesus really look like? Not the soft, pale, long-haired figure of the paintings. By every honest measure we have, he was a short, weathered, brown-skinned working man with dark eyes and short dark hair, a man who looked so utterly ordinary that he could vanish into a crowd of his own followers. And here is the part worth sitting with. That ordinariness may not be an accident. It may be the entire point. The story does not present a glowing, otherworldly figure that no one could relate to. It presents someone who looked like a carpenter because he was one. Someone you would have passed on the street without a second glance. The face was common on purpose, so that the message could belong to everyone, not just the beautiful, not just the powerful, not just one nation or one color. We made him look like us in every culture for centuries. But maybe the deeper truth is the reverse. He looked like the most ordinary person imaginable, so that every one of us could see ourselves in him. So the next time you see that familiar painting, remember, the real face was probably nothing like it, and somehow that makes the whole story even more powerful. If this changed the picture in your head even a little, let me know in the comments. I read every single one. Hit the like button. It really does help these videos reach more people, and subscribe, because next time we are going somewhere even stranger. We are going to ask what happened in the 3 days between Jesus' death and the empty tomb. Where, according to the Bible, did he go? Until then, take care of yourself, keep asking the harder questions, and I will see you in the next one.